They say betrayal tastes like ash. For me, it tasted like the acrid smoke of a burning dream, the bitter tang of a legacy being systematically dismantled by the very hands I trusted to carry it forward. I'd built an empire from nothing, only to watch my own flesh and blood try to bury it beneath a mountain of lies and deceit. But they forgot one thing. An old dog might be slow, but he still has teeth, and sometimes the quiet ones are the most dangerous. If you've ever poured your soul into something only to have it threatened by greed and treachery, then you know the fire that burns in the heart of this story. Hit that like button if you're ready to hear how an old man fought back, and subscribe to join a community that understands the true meaning of justice. Now let's dive into the story of how I took back what was mine. My name is James Caldwell, but most folks around here just called me Big Jim. For 45 years, that name was synonymous with Caldwell's construction. From the moment I first swung a hammer on my own, fresh out of high school with nothing but a beat-up Ford pickup and a stubborn refusal to fail, I poured my life into this company. Every brick laid, every beam raised, every foundation poured across this city held a piece of my sweat, my smarts, and my soul. I watched this skyline grow, and a part of me felt like I'd built it with my own two hands. The calluses on my palms were a testament to a life lived honestly, building things that lasted. At 65, though, the body starts grumbling louder than a faulty engine on a cold morning. My back ached. My knees sometimes popped with the disconcerting sound of dry twigs snapping, and the early mornings weren't quite as invigorating as they used to be. It was time. Time to step back, to let a younger, more energetic mind take the reins. My legacy, I believed, was secure. My chosen successor was Michael, my nephew. He was bright, ambitious, and had been with the company for 15 years, working his way up from humping lumber in the yard to running some of our most complex projects. He was, in many ways, the son I'd always wished for in the business. The announcement was made at our annual company picnic. It was a beautiful late summer afternoon. The smell of charcoal and barbecue sauce hung in the air, mixed with the faint scent of freshly cut grass. Kids shrieked with laughter, chasing each other around inflatable bouncy castles, while their parents, my employees, gathered under the sprawling oak trees. Many of them had been with me for decades, their faces a tapestry of respect, affection, and shared history. I stood on a makeshift stage, a cooler turned upside down, and looked out at them. My voice, usually booming across a construction site, softened as I spoke of the future, of growth, of passing the torch. I spoke of Michael, praising his dedication, his vision, his understanding of the Caldwell way. Michael, standing beside me, beamed. He was a handsome young man, sharp suit, perfectly coiffed hair. He shook hands, accepted hugs, and basked in the glow of congratulations. He truly looked the part of a successful heir. Even my own son, David, who'd always preferred the easy life to the hard grind of the business, surprised me. He clapped Michael on the shoulder, offering what seemed like a genuinely warm embrace, promising to support him in this new chapter. A profound sense of peace settled over me. My life's work, my empire, was in good hands, or so I thought. That peaceful feeling, it turned out, was merely the calm before the storm, a deceptive quiet before the thunderclap of betrayal. The first hint of trouble came subtly, a slight tremor in the foundation I had built, like the first almost imperceptible crack in a concrete slab. I was still coming into the office most days, trying to ease myself out of the driver's seat to let Michael take the lead. I saw myself as an elder statesman now, a wise advisor, not a micromanaging boss. But old habits die hard. A few weeks after the picnic, while casually reviewing some paperwork, a discrepancy caught my eye. It was an invoice from a new supplier, Apex Materials, for a major commercial project we had underway. The number seemed a little off. Not by much, mind you. A few $1,000s here, a few hundred there. I initially dismissed it as a rounding error, a minor administrative glitch in Michael's new systems. But James Caldwell hadn't built an empire by ignoring small details. My mind was a steel trap when it came to numbers, a necessity when every penny counted. That night sleep wouldn't come. My gut, that old infallible compass, was churning. I kept seeing the invoice, the slightly inflated figure. The next morning I arrived at the office an hour earlier than usual. The building was still quiet, the only sound the hum of the fluorescent lights. I sat down at my old desk, the one Michael was now occupying, and quietly pulled up old invoices, cross-referencing them with current orders. My fingers, gnarled and scarred from decades of labor, moved with a surprising dexterity across the keyboard. What I found sent a cold prickle down my spine. The error wasn't isolated. There were several, always slightly inflated, always favoring the same supplier, Apex Materials. And each instance felt less like a mistake and more like a deliberate, carefully concealed sleight of hand. I decided to bring it up to Michael during one of our transition meetings. He was leaning back in my old chair looking confident, almost regal. The afternoon sun streamed through the window, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air, creating a halo around him that now in retrospect seemed darkly ironic. "Michael," I began, pushing the stack of invoices across the polished mahogany desk. "Take a look at these Apex invoices. Something feels off." He picked them up, his usual sharp eyes scanning the figures. But then, a subtle shift. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, and his eyes, usually so direct, darted away for a fraction of a second. A flicker of something I couldn't quite place. Surprise, annoyance, guilt, crossed his face. He cleared his throat a little too loudly. "Oh, those? Just a new system glitch, Uncle Jim. We're working out the kinks. Apex offers competitive rates, and they're minority-owned. Good for our diversification goals." His explanation was smooth, almost too smooth. The words flowed effortlessly, a practiced speech. He even managed a charming, disarming smile. I nodded, pretending to accept his explanation, but the seed of doubt he'd tried to smother with platitudes had taken root. It wasn't just doubt. It was a burgeoning suspicion that felt like a knot tightening in my stomach. Diversification goals? Competitive rates? It sounded like corporate jargon, a smokescreen. The old Jim Caldwell would have clapped him on the back and said, "Good man, Michael, always thinking ahead." But this Jim Caldwell, the one with 45 years of building a business and a lifetime of reading people, knew better. My instinct screamed that something was wrong. I decided, right then and there, that my oversight period would be extending a little longer than planned, much to Michael's barely concealed irritation. He tried to hide it, but I saw the brief tightening of his lips, the almost imperceptible clench of his fists under the table. He thought he was playing me, but I was playing him right back. I was a ghost in my own company, a phantom presence, observing, waiting. Over the next few weeks, I shifted my routine. I started arriving at the office earlier, long before Michael and most of the staff. The quiet mornings became my sanctuary, my hunting ground. I stayed later too, sometimes until the cleaning crew arrived, digging deeper, following the faint scent of deceit. I used my old security key card, the one Michael hadn't thought to deactivate, to access files and records. I found that Apex Materials was indeed minority-owned on paper. But a deeper dive into public records, a few discreet calls to old contacts in city planning and corporate registries revealed a different story. The address listed for Apex traced back to a small, nondescript office building notorious for holding a dozen phantom businesses, shell corporations designed to obscure true ownership. The kind of place you set up when you don't want anyone looking too closely. My gut churned. This wasn't just a glitch. This wasn't a rounding error. This was a setup, a deliberate, calculated scheme. And the more I dug, the more the pieces clicked into place with a horrifying inevitability. I found a distinct pattern. Inflated charges for materials, services paid for but never fully rendered, materials ordered but suspiciously never delivered to our construction sites. We were paying for ghosts, for thin air, and the money was disappearing into the ether. The total amounted to hundreds of thousands of dollars, siphoned off over the past year. Hundreds of thousands that should have gone into our employees' bonuses, into new equipment, into strengthening the very company I'd built. But who was behind it? That was the agonizing question. Michael was ambitious, yes, but outright theft. It seemed unfathomable. I had mentored him, trusted him, loved him like a son. He was family. The thought alone was a bitter pill to swallow. I wanted to believe he was just a naive pawn, tricked by some unscrupulous supplier. I searched, desperately, for any other explanation. Then, one late night, hunched over my old computer in a darkened office, the glow of the screen illuminating the lines of worry etched on my face, I saw a transaction that chilled me to the bone. A substantial payment from Apex Materials, not to another shell corporation, not to a generic vendor account, but routed directly to an account I recognized. It was David's personal account. My son. My own flesh and blood. The easygoing David, who rarely showed interest in the gritty details of the business, was tied to this. The shock was a physical blow, stealing the air from my lungs. But the horror wasn't over. Further investigation revealed a second significant payment from Apex Materials, channeled to a separate holding account. A quick cross-reference with internal banking records and a few discreet inquiries confirmed my worst fears. This account was controlled by Michael. The betrayal hit me like a physical blow, a pain deeper than any strained muscle or aching joint I'd ever experienced on a job site. It was a cold, sharp blade twisted in the most vulnerable part of my heart. My nephew, the son I never had, the one I had chosen to carry my legacy forward, and my actual son, the one I'd always tried to guide, were conspiring against me. They weren't just stealing my money. They were stealing my legacy, undermining everything I'd worked for, everything I believed in. The very foundation of Caldwell's construction, built on honesty and integrity, was being hollowed out from within by the people I loved most. The anger was a burning inferno, but beneath it, a crushing wave of sorrow threatened to drown me. How could they? How could my family do this to me? I felt a cold fury, a controlled burn that threatened to erupt, but I knew I couldn't lash out yet. To accuse them without undeniable, irrefutable proof would tear the family apart, and worse, it could potentially destroy the company. Rumors of fraud and internal conflict could cripple Caldwell's construction, ruining the reputation I had spent a lifetime building. No, I had to be strategic, surgical. I had to feign ignorance to play the trusting, slightly senile old man. I had to become the wolf in sheep's clothing, observing, gathering strength, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. My retirement, the peaceful chapter I'd envisioned, had just been postponed indefinitely. This was war, and I was going to win. The days that followed the discovery were a surreal torment. Every smile I offered, every casual conversation I held with Michael and David, felt like a performance. I was an actor in a play I hadn't auditioned for, playing the role of the proud, soon-to-be retired patriarch, while inside, a tempest raged. The world around me felt muted, as if a thick pane of glass separated me from reality. The laughter of my grandchildren, the familiar scent of sawdust from a nearby project, even the taste of my morning coffee. Everything was overshadowed by the bitter taste of betrayal. Sleep became a luxury I couldn't afford. My nights were spent staring at the ceiling, replaying every interaction, every suspicious glance, every smooth lie. My mind, usually a calm harbor, was now a turbulent sea of what-ifs and how-could-theys. The emotional weight was crushing, yet I knew I couldn't break. Not yet. I called the usual Sunday family dinner, a tradition that had been a cornerstone of our lives for decades. My wife, bless her heart, had spent all day preparing a roast, the aroma filling our home with a comforting warmth that felt utterly at odds with the coldness in my heart. Michael was there, laughing a little too loudly at one of David's stale jokes. David, on the other hand, was unusually quiet, avoiding my gaze more than usual, his eyes flitting nervously around the room. I watched them, saw the subtle glances they exchanged, the shared secrets in their eyes, a flicker of conspiratorial understanding that cut deeper than any dagger. They thought they were being discreet, but to my seasoned eyes, it was as clear as day. They were in this together, and they were hiding it, I kept my face a mask of geniality, forcing smiles that felt like grimaces, making polite conversation that felt like pulling teeth. I even complimented Michael on a recent project, praising his new initiatives for efficiency. He preened, puffed up with pride, completely oblivious to the storm brewing in his uncle's mind, to the fact that every word of praise was a calculated barb, a feigned gesture designed to lull him into a false sense of security. It was sickening, this charade, but necessary. Every interaction was a step in my new, painful game of chess, and I was playing for keeps. Over the next few weeks, I transformed myself into a ghost in my own company. I moved through the offices, smiling, shaking hands, offering words of encouragement, but my eyes missed nothing. I was no longer Big Jim, the jovial boss. I was an observer, a silent hunter. I noticed how Michael spent an inordinate amount of time behind closed doors, often with David. I saw the stacks of Apex Materials invoices that seemed to grow larger with each passing day. I watched employees, loyal men and women who had dedicated years to Caldwell's construction, unknowingly contribute to a company being bled dry by its future leaders. The injustice burned within me, fueling a quiet, simmering rage. I knew I needed more than just intuition and circumstantial evidence. I needed ironclad proof. Years ago, a security consultant had taught me a few tricks about digital forensics. It was time to dust off those old lessons. Late one night, after everyone had gone home, I installed monitoring software on key company computers, particularly Michael's and the accounting department's main server. It was a risk, an invasion of privacy, but the stakes were too high. This wasn't just about money. It was about my life's work, my integrity, the trust of hundreds of employees. I carefully logged the keystrokes, captured screenshots, and monitored email traffic, feeling like a spy in my own domain. Every click, every document opened, every email sent was now a potential piece of the puzzle. But technical evidence alone might not be enough in court, and I knew I couldn't handle the full weight of an investigation on my own. I needed professional help, someone discreet and sharp. I remembered Brenda Hayes, a former police detective who had transitioned into private investigation after a distinguished career. She was known for her tenacity and her ability to unravel complex financial crimes. I called her, setting up a meeting outside of the office, in a quiet, unassuming diner on the outskirts of town. I introduced her to Michael as a financial consultant. I was bringing in for a minor internal audit to streamline operations before my full retirement. Michael, ever eager to impress, welcomed her with an almost irritating enthusiasm. He had no idea he was welcoming a predator into the henhouse. Brenda, sharp and observant, quickly corroborated my suspicions. She wasn't fooled by Michael's charm or David's feigned nonchalance. She moved through the company like a shadow, asking precise questions, meticulously examining records, her calm demeanor hiding a steel-trap mind. She traced the money trails through layers of shell corporations, identified the true beneficial owners, and connected every single dot. The web of deceit was far more intricate than even I had initially imagined. What Brenda uncovered filled in the horrifying blanks. David, always restless, always feeling overshadowed by Michael's rapid success within the company, had been the initial instigator. He'd always felt entitled, believing his bloodline alone should guarantee him a position of power, even though he lacked the work ethic and business acumen. He'd seen Michael's ambition and, in a twisted moment, tempted him with the allure of quick, untraceable cash. He painted a picture of a vast, untapped reserve of wealth just waiting to be siphoned off. An old man, me, too blind and too slow to notice. Michael, seeing an opportunity to get rich faster, to perhaps assert even more control and escape my eventual oversight, had fallen into the trap. Their plan was insidious. Drain enough capital to start their own lucrative venture once I was fully retired, leaving a hollowed-out Caldwell's construction in their wake, a mere husk of its former glory. They intended to bury my legacy and then dance on its grave. The emotional toll was immense. My son, my nephew, plotting to destroy everything I had built. It wasn't just the money. It was the sheer contempt, the audacious disrespect for my life's work, for the very values I had tried to instill in them. There were nights I'd find myself sitting alone in my study, the old photos of Michael and David as children smiling up at me from the mantelpiece, tears silently streaming down my face. How could these innocent faces have grown into such greedy, treacherous adults? Was it something I did? Something I failed to do? The self-doubt was a corrosive acid, eating away at my resolve. But then the anger would return, hot and fierce, burning away the doubt. No, this was not my fault. This was their choice, and they would pay the price. One afternoon, a few days before I intended to make my move, I was walking past Michael's office, ostensibly heading for the break room. The door was slightly ajar, and I heard hushed voices. It was Michael and David. I paused, pretending to adjust my tie, straining to hear. Their voices were barely audible through the thin walls, but the urgency in their tones was palpable. "He suspects something, Dave," Michael whispered, his voice laced with a newfound nervousness I hadn't heard before. "He's been asking too many questions about Apex. He's been poking around." David's voice, always a low growl, was sharper now. "He's old, Mike. He won't figure it out. He's probably just forgetting things. Just stick to the plan. One more big payout and we're clear." My heart pounded, a frantic drum against my ribs. A mix of fear and cold resolve surged through me. They were going to try one more big score. They were getting nervous, getting greedy, and they were going to accelerate their timeline. I had to act fast. The window of opportunity was closing. The game of cat and mouse was over. It was time for Big Jim to become the lion. The hunt was about to begin in earnest. That overheard conversation was the spark that ignited the powder keg. One more big payout and we're clear. Those words echoed in my mind, a relentless drumbeat pushing me forward. They believed I was old, forgetful, easily manipulated. They saw my kindness as weakness, my trust as naivete. That assumption, that profound underestimation of Big Jim Caldwell, would be their undoing. The sorrow I'd felt for their betrayal began to recede, replaced by a cold, surgical focus. My grief would come later when the fight was over. For now, there was only the grim satisfaction of a plan taking shape. I spent the next few days in a blur of calculated activity, moving with a renewed sense of purpose. Brenda Hayes, my private investigator, became my shadow, my confidant. We worked in tandem, often late into the night, compiling every shred of evidence into an unassailable dossier. Bank statements, forged invoices, doctored delivery receipts, internal emails detailing the scheme, even recorded phone conversations, all meticulously organized, cross-referenced, and verified. We built a case that was airtight, a mountain of undeniable proof that even the most silver-tongued lawyer would struggle to dismantle. My greatest challenge was maintaining the facade. I still went to the office, still greeted Michael with a seemingly benign smile, still offered David a paternal nod. But every interaction was a silent battle of wills, a test of my self-control. There were moments, especially when Michael would talk enthusiastically about his vision for the company's future, that a surge of hot anger would threaten to break through my carefully constructed calm. I'd feel a tremor in my hand, a tightening in my jaw, and I'd have to consciously relax, reminding myself of the bigger picture. Not yet, Jim. Wait for it. This patience, this discipline, was a testament to the decades I'd spent building, problem-solving, facing down adversity. I knew how to wait for the opportune moment, how to strike with precision. I decided to call an emergency board meeting. Ostensibly, it was to finalize my retirement package and formally announce Michael's promotion to CEO. The board members, a group of long-standing associates and friends, would expect this. It was the natural progression. I sent out the invitations, careful to include David as a major shareholder, a courtesy that would ensure his presence and ultimately his downfall. And I made sure Brenda Hayes was on the list, posing as my financial advisor to help navigate the complexities of my retirement transition. The trap was set. The day of the meeting dawned clear and cold, a crisp autumn morning that felt heavy with impending change. I arrived at the Caldwell's construction boardroom, a room where countless decisions, triumphs, and challenges had been forged over the years. The long mahogany table gleamed under the chandeliers, reflecting the nervous energy that already filled the air. Michael and David were already there, chatting animatedly. But their laughter seemed brittle, their eyes darting towards me with a subtle nervousness that betrayed their calm exteriors. They exchanged glances, a conspiratorial dance of secret keepers, but I saw the fear lurking beneath their bravado. They knew deep down that something was amiss. They just didn't know what or how deep my knowledge ran. As the other board members filed in, old Mr. Henderson, with his perpetually furrowed brow, Mrs. Rodriguez, sharp as a tack, and young Mr. Chen, eager to impress, I felt a strange mix of exhilaration and dread. This wasn't just a business meeting, it was an execution of trust, of a family bond, of a shared legacy, my legacy. I took my seat at the head of the table, my usual spot, but this time it felt different. It felt like a throne from which I was about to deliver judgment. Michael sat to my right, David across from him. Brenda, looking impeccable and utterly professional in a sharp business suit, sat quietly beside me, a silent guardian of the truth. I began calmly, my voice steady, imbued with the weight of 45 years of honest labor. I reminisced about the company's humble beginnings, the relentless work ethic, the unwavering values of integrity and hard work that were the bedrock of Caldwell's construction. I spoke of the challenges we'd overcome, the community we'd built, the families we'd supported. My words were carefully chosen, designed to evoke the very essence of what they were trying to destroy. I watched Michael shift uncomfortably, David pick at an imaginary thread on his suit jacket. They knew I was building to something, but they couldn't possibly imagine the scope of the avalanche I was about to unleash. Then I paused. I let the silence hang in the air, thick with unspoken tension. I looked directly at Michael, then at David, my gaze unwavering, devoid of the paternal affection I had once held for them. My voice, when I spoke again, was no longer warm. It was hard, laced with sorrow and steel. I also wanted to share some interesting findings from my final audit. A collective ripple of unease spread around the table. Michael's composure visibly cracked. David's eyes widened, a flicker of pure panic replacing his earlier nervousness. He tried to speak, but no words came out. With the assistance of my financial advisor, Ms. Hayes, I continued, gesturing to Brenda, we have uncovered what can only be described as a systematic effort to defraud this company. Brenda, with a click of a remote, activated the large projector screen at the end of the room. The first image flashed up, a meticulously compiled list of bank statements, highlighting a series of suspicious transfers from Caldwell's Construction to Apex Materials. Then came the forged invoices, side by side with original vendor prices, clearly showing the inflated figures. The room went absolutely silent, save for the hum of the projector. Next were the emails. Not just one or two, but dozens, exchanged between Michael and David, detailing the scheme. They discussed inflated prices, planned diversions of materials, and even joked about Uncle Jim being too old to notice. There was a sickening screenshot of a conversation where David wrote, "Old man's practically drooling, won't know what hit him when we pull the plug." The words hit me like a physical blow, even though I had read them before. To see them, projected for all to see, twisted the knife deeper. Finally, Brenda projected a direct transfer ledger. It showed explicit payments from Apex Materials directly into Michael's personal account. And then, the ultimate betrayal, payments flowing directly into David's personal account. The dates, the amounts, the routing numbers, all undeniable, all irrefutable. The air left the room. It was thick with the weight of revelation, the collective gasp of disbelief from the board members. Michael's face drained of color, his usual confidence evaporating like morning mist. He looked like a deer caught in headlights, his mouth opening and closing without sound. David, usually so sullen, now looked like a trapped animal, cornered and desperate, his eyes darting frantically around the room, searching for an escape that wasn't there. "This gentleman," I said, my voice cutting through the stunned silence, "is the systematic defrauding of Caldwell's construction. This is the theft of my legacy, and it was perpetrated by my own son and my own nephew." The words were delivered with a cold precision, each one a hammer blow. Michael finally stammered, his voice hoarse. "Uncle Jim, I can explain. It's a misunderstanding, I swear." He tried to stand, but his legs seemed to give out and he slumped back into his chair. "Explain what, Michael?" I cut him off, my eyes blazing, the decades of suppressed anger finally erupting. "Explain how you gutted this company from the inside. Explain how you betrayed my trust, the trust of every person who ever worked here. The trust of your own family?" My voice rose, echoing in the stunned silence, filled with the raw emotion of a broken heart and a burning fury. "I handed you my life's work, my legacy, and you spit on it. You spat on everything I built, everything I believed in." David, surprisingly, was the first to regain his voice, though it was a low growl of pure, unadulterated resentment, laced with a pathetic attempt at self-justification. "You always favored him, Dad. Always the golden boy, always Michael. I built this company too. I deserved more." His words ignited a fresh surge of rage within me. "You built nothing but resentment, David," I roared, my voice shaking the very walls of the boardroom. "You never lifted a finger unless it benefited you. You squandered every opportunity I gave you. And Michael, I thought you were different. I thought you had honor, integrity. I thought you understood what this company stood for." My voice was raw, ragged, but it conveyed every ounce of my pain and fury. Brenda, sensing the perfect moment to press the advantage, stepped forward, her presence a silent threat of legal action. Her voice was calm, professional, a stark contrast to my emotional outburst, making her words all the more chilling. "Mr. Caldwell has compiled overwhelming evidence. The authorities have been informed, and they're prepared to proceed with charges of fraud and embezzlement. These documents will be handed over directly to the district attorney's office, if an amicable resolution cannot be reached." The implication hung in the air. Jail time. For both of them. The room descended into chaos. Michael slumped further, his face pale and clammy, muttering pleas. David sprang to his feet, shouting, raging, denying everything even as the evidence blazed on the screen behind him. The board members sat stunned, their faces a mixture of shock, anger, and profound sadness. But I stood firm, a rock in the storm I had unleashed. I wasn't seeking to destroy them entirely, not if they cooperated. I wanted my company back, my integrity restored, my legacy redeemed. And they were about to learn that Big Jim Caldwell, though old, was far from a fool. The battle had begun, but the war for my legacy was far from over. This was merely the first volley. The real fight, the arduous negotiation for justice and restitution, was about to begin. And I was ready. The boardroom, once a place of strategic discussion and mutual respect, had become a war zone. Michael, now a pathetic shell of his former confident self, began to whimper, his pleas dissolving into choked apologies and desperate bargaining. "Uncle Jim, please, I beg you. Think of the family, my career." David, however, was a different beast. He raged, overturning his chair in a fit of impotent fury, his face contorted with a venomous blend of anger and self-pity. "This is your fault, old man. You drove me to it. You never saw me, never cared." His words were like oil on my burning rage. "Don't you dare, David," I thundered, stepping towards him, my hand clenched into a fist. "Don't you dare lay your failures at my feet. I gave you every chance. I gave you a name, a home, a company, and you threw it all away for greed." Brenda, ever the professional, stepped between us, her voice a calm, authoritative presence that cut through the hysteria. "Gentlemen, this is not a courtroom or a playground. Mr. Caldwell has presented his case. You have a choice. Cooperate and mitigate the damage, or face the full force of the law. The evidence is overwhelming. There will be no denying it." Her gaze was steely, unblinking, conveying the inescapable reality of their situation. The next few hours were an agonizing, brutal negotiation. Brenda, acting as mediator, laid out the terms with clinical precision. It wasn't about vengeance, she argued. It was about restitution and justice. Michael and David were given a stark choice: sign over their shares back to Caldwell's Construction, relinquish any claims to the company's future, and repay every cent they had stolen, with interest, or face immediate criminal charges for fraud and embezzlement. There was no ambiguity. The documents Brenda had prepared were legally binding, meticulously detailed, and left no room for maneuver. The silence that followed was deafening, punctuated only by Michael's sniffles and David's heavy, ragged breathing. They were caught, trapped. The empire they had tried to secretly plunder was now demanding its pound of flesh. They argued, they pleaded, they tried to find loopholes, but Brenda was unyielding. She had anticipated every evasion, every desperate tactic. Each time they tried to deflect, she countered with another piece of damning evidence, another legal precedent, another reminder of the prison cells that awaited them. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, but was probably only 3 or 4 hours, they broke. Michael, utterly defeated, his spirit visibly crushed, was the first to sign. His hand trembled so violently he could barely hold the pen, his signature a shaky scrawl. David, still seething with resentment, glared at me as he signed, his eyes promising a lifetime of hatred. But he signed. He had no other choice. Their names would be tarnished, their reputations shattered, their dreams of a self-made empire built on stolen wealth utterly annihilated. But they would avoid jail time. A bitter compromise, perhaps, but one I had deemed necessary to salvage the company without a prolonged public legal battle that could have crippled us. The cost of this victory was immense. The betrayal had ripped through the very fabric of my family, leaving gaping, festering wounds that I knew would never truly heal. My wife, when I finally told her the full scope of what had happened, wept inconsolably. The trust that had been the bedrock of our relationships was shattered, replaced by a deep-seated pain and suspicion. The family dinners, once a cherished tradition, became impossible. Michael disappeared from our lives, too ashamed and too broken to face us. David, true to his nature, continued to harbor resentment, sending me terse, accusatory emails from time to time, blaming me for his ruined life. I never responded. There was nothing left to say. But amidst the personal devastation, there was a grim peace, a quiet satisfaction in knowing I had done what was necessary. I had protected my life's work. I had salvaged my legacy from the jaws of greed and deceit. I had shown them, and the world, that while I might be 65 and ready for retirement, Big Jim Caldwell was far from a fool. In the aftermath, the company needed a firm hand and a clear direction. I did retire finally, but not without first ensuring Caldwell's Construction was stronger than ever, its foundations rebuilt with reinforced steel. I spent months meticulously restructuring, installing a new management team comprised of loyal, honest employees who had proven their worth through years of dedicated service. People like Maria, our head accountant, who had always meticulously flagged even minor discrepancies, or Tom, our project manager, whose integrity was as solid as the concrete he poured. These were the true inheritors of the Caldwell way. I ensured new, stringent oversight protocols were put in place, ironclad systems that would prevent such betrayal from ever happening again. I didn't forgive Michael or David, not truly. How could I? The scars of their actions ran too deep. But I found a grim peace in knowing that I had faced their treachery head-on and emerged victorious. The weight of their betrayal still lingered, a phantom ache in my heart, a constant reminder of the fragility of trust and the corrupting power of greed. Yet, stronger than that ache was the unwavering pride in the empire I had built, brick by honest brick, upheld by integrity, and ultimately, saved by my own unwavering will. The story of Caldwell's Construction, and of Big Jim Caldwell, became a testament not just to building, but to preserving. It became a whisper of caution to those who might ever consider undermining the honest work of others. The old man had ridden into the sunset, not quietly into retirement, but with the roar of a lion defending his pride. And in the end, that was a legacy worth fighting for. The sunsets over the city now hold a different meaning for me. I see the skyline, dotted with buildings my company raised, and I feel a profound sense of accomplishment. The phantom ache of betrayal is still there, a constant companion, but it is now tempered by the quiet strength of vindication. Justice, in its own bittersweet way, had been served. My empire endured, stronger and wiser, a monument to integrity against the tide of avarice. And as for Michael and David, they learned a harsh lesson about the true cost of greed and the unwavering resolve of an old man who refused to let his legacy crumble. If this story of betrayal and hard-won justice resonated with you, show your support by hitting the like button. Have you ever faced such a profound betrayal? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Let's discuss how integrity always triumphs in the end. And for more tales of poetic justice and ultimate revenge, subscribe to our channel. Until next time, remember, some legacies are built to last, no matter who tries to tear them down.